The audit of Davis Co's financial statement for the year ended 30th November 2017 is nearing completion, and the auditor's report is due to be signed when? Next week. Dave Co manufactures parts and components for the aviation industry. You are conducting an engagement quality control review on the audit of Davis Co, which is a listed entity. That thing is not taken for granted. It is a listed entity. Okay. And a significant new client of your firm. The grant financial statement recognized revenue of 8.7 million, assets of 15.2 million, and profit before tax of 1.8 million. You have identified the following issue as a result of your review. Okay. So what the examiner is saying is that he's giving you some preambles here. Now this thing is not funny. It means that any scenario you read which has figures inside, you must calculate what? The materiality. The examiner doesn't give you this for fun. Anytime he gives it to you, it means he wants you to calculate the materiality and tell us what we have to do about it. So the planned audit approach to trade payables was to place reliance on purchasing controls and keep substantive testing to a minimum. During control testing on trade payables, from a random statistical sample, the audit team identified 3 purchase orders which had not been authorized by the procurement manager. On review of the supporting document, the audit team concluded that the item was legitimate business purchases and therefore concluded that no additional procedure were required. Now the requirement was evaluate the quality issues and implications for the completion of the audit. Yes, what is that? In other words, I told you quality is about how we carry out our audits. In other words, the audit procedure they undertook, was it good enough? Are you getting the idea? That's the quality. So was it good enough? And what is the implication of it? That's what the examiner is asking you. So in this scenario, what would you say? What do you think is happening here? Yes, we are trying to.
Are we not discussing it in the context of the quality control, like the ISQ? Yes, like are we not discussing the context where we have engagement performance, firm leadership, engagement, partition? You know, it has some building blocks.
Yeah.
Quality control.
Yeah.
So those ones that relate. The issues here, those ones.
The fact of this, the case will give you a different view about quality controls. So even though there are those generalized frameworks, the fact of the case will not relate you to do that. So in this case, what did we do that we didn't do well in the audit? It's about quality control. Now, if we undertake an inappropriate audit procedure, that means it will affect the quality of our audit, true or false? That's it. If we gathered an audit evidence and we didn't probe into finding out further about it, that will affect the quality of our audit. So, yes, that framework is there, but you don't have to limit yourself in that framework because the fact of the case will tell you what you have to do. That is why I want you to understand that when you talk about quality, it's about whether we have done the work according to generally accepted auditing standards and whether the evidence gathered is appropriate for our audit to be carried out. So, what is the fact of the case here? What's the fact of the case?
Purchase orders that are not authorized. But the auditing concluded that the purchases made.
Okay.
Yes. So maybe they didn't quality control issue go further.
Now, madam, If you didn't probe further, what does it tell you in the first place on getting that information?
So you don't get enough evidence. Evidence will not be enough, and that will affect the process.
One-sided. What does this tells you? You did a random report, random, and 3 of the purchase orders, boom, came out that they were not authorized. What does it tell you? What does it indicate to you? Before then, their control system is what? Ineffective.
Yes.
That's the first thing.
That will be right. So that's an issue to consider.
That's the issue. So first and foremost, this indicates what? Ineffective control systems. So if the control systems are ineffective, then John's point will come in and Elvis. You have to probe further to find out if there were other.
But I wrote it all. My first point was the control system in the.
Yes, I think when I was reading, I saw that. Yes.
The control system in the ordinary purchasing and recording of supply must be improved. There should be a review of segregation of duties among staff in that unit.
That is where you screw it up. You are now making recommendation when you have not even finished with the fact of the case. And in the end, how?
The procurement procedure must be strengthened, but additional procedure must be carried on to confirm how.
So that thing you brought in the middle should have been removed, because your recommendation is not needed here. You are not writing to those charged with governance, telling them what to do. Do you understand the idea? So by making that recommendation, you distract us of the answer that you were looking for.
There was no requirement
There was no what? Yes, for recommendation. So you don't recommend anything. That's why I said, if you who need Kasana, recommendation, if you want, put it at the last end. Like with recommendation, by after the first and the third point now, raise it now. It's okay. But what if I say middle? You made a recommendation, then further you are saying that they should probe further. No. That is a wrong approach. Yes, Nana?
But why, can you think about it this way?
Yes, I'm listening.
You see, they applied random sampling.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean they felt the internal controls were strong.
But from the scenario, is that not what we were
That's
told?
why the first point I was making is that you can't just place reliance, and this is a new client. And you just started auditing a new client, then you just going to place reliance on their control when you haven't even tested. That's why the issues were. That's why the issues were coming up. Even because sometimes you can even do random sampling, and the issues will be okay.
Now, so you need to go back. You don't have to judge the audit team. Don't place control. Ever as in our back.
What I'm saying is that before they place controls, what did they do? They do before they place reliance.
We are not interested in that. In this case, what is here? What is here is that when the audit procedure we use tells us that there is ineffective controls in place. As such, we have to adopt a system-based audit approach. There should have been a system audit approach rather than that substantive test of control that they use. So that is an indication there is an effective. So don't tell the audit team that what made you to place reliance on it. They did a planning. They understand the entity. That's why they place the reliance on it. So they were now testing. So it is from the testing that they concluded that boom, things are not good. Are you getting the idea? So you now repeating the real of a problem they identified from the audit procedure doesn't mean anything to us. It's difficult. It's difficult. But understanding the requirement is important. Elvis, do you see your connection? Do you see what I was saying about your connection? So if that line had been cancelled, you would have taken it.
So look at some of our answers that I wrote.
Yes, let me see here.
It says, for the first one, the issues to consider, I wrote one, whether the decision not to carry out additional procedure was supported. It's not correct.
That's a key point. What what happened? Were you marked?
I was given a question mark.
Where was that? Excuse me. Yeah, so you were saying something.
So I wrote whether the decision to not to carry out additional procedure was appropriate. And he gave me a question.
Whether, when you start a sentence with whether, what are you saying? Whether. Are you getting the idea? Whether. When you say whether, it should be connecting with something. Are you getting? This is grammar.
You started the sentence with whether.
Yeah, he said she was doing bullet points. Okay, no authorization from procurement manager. Second, whether the decision not to carry out procedure was appropriate. Whether the business needed the item that were purchased. No, it should be in a sentence form. This is level 3 audit, so that's why they won't give you a chance for some of these errors. They should take their time. You are going to become a chartered accountant. We should take our time on it.
I think that I'm now getting the impulse of the question.
You are not getting it.
The planned audit approach to trade payables was to place reliance on purchasing controls and keep certain tests to the minimum. So it tells you that if you are auditing trade payables, what must you do to get to the bottom of it? But these people limited their review or whatever into the reliance of purchasing controls and whatnot. They didn't do further tests.
They didn't do further tests. So the idea of writing out what we have to consider in this case was, one, the story in itself is an indication of what? Ineffective controls. That's the first thing. Okay? So the scenario is an indication of what? Ineffective controls. That's the first point. Then second, the thing that had not been authorized by the audit team saying that it's not they don't need additional information is an inappropriate decision they took. As such, the audit team should have what? Design other audit procedures to check or increase the size of the sample that they used. Because remember, they were using random sampling. So if random sampling, they should have what? Increase the size. Could have used another audit strategy in relation to that. Derek, are you okay?
Yes.
Or you're seeing it? Are you seeing the connection?
Yes.
So is it a difference between what we are saying and what you think it should be?
But what I'm thinking is that,
Yeah.
you see, when we are talking about the
The scenario is an indication of ineffective controls in existence. In existence. Second point, or you can make it as a continuation. The audit procedure therefore appeared to have been inadequate. The audit procedure appeared to have been inadequate. The audit procedure appears to have been inadequate. The audit procedure should have been, what did I say? The audit procedure appears to have been what? Inadequate. Yes. Third, the auditor should review. The auditor should review. Yeah, should review, because we've not signed the audit, so we can tell them to go and what? Do it again. Are you getting it? So not should have. So the auditor should review whether a control-based approach is appropriate. Whether a control-based approach is appropriate, and consider whether more substantive testing on the payable component is required, and consider whether more substantive testing on payables component is required, and consider whether more substantive testing procedure on payables component is required. Last point. It therefore represents. Now, when I say it's therefore, I'm referring to everything we've listed above, isn't it? Okay. So it therefore represents a potentially significant audit finding. It therefore represents a potentially significant finding. It therefore represents a potentially significant audit finding. Audit finding, which should be communicated to those charged with governance. Which should be communicated to those charged with governance. Which should be communicated to those charged with governance. Which should be communicated to those charged with governance. Like this is what you are supposed to do.
It's free and fair.
You wrote it? So, you know, when you're in the exam hall, it's difficult to process some of these things. But it's about understanding. When you understand the core rules, you will get it. Let's look at it. Following a review of petty cash transactions. So the first one was about trade payables, test of controls on trade payables. The second one is about petty cash. Petty cash. So let's see. Following a review. Yeah.
I thought the requirement was in two parts. First, you evaluate the quality control issues.
Yeah.
Then the indication for the completion of audits.
Yeah, that is the implication is what we have added, that a further audit procedure should be carried out. That's the implication for the conclusion of our audit.
Oh, I see you.
Today I'm not
Are you getting it? That's it. So it is not about writing quality control issues. Implication. No. It's telling us that at the end of the audit, what must we do? That's the implication. Okay. So let's go. Following a review of petty cash transaction, the audit assistant identified that petty cashier paid for taxi fares for personnel, non-business journey with a total of $175. Following discussions with the audit assistant, you have ascertained that he did not report the matter further as the amount is immaterial. The audit assistant has also commented that the petty cashier is his brother and that he did not want to get him into trouble. What's happening here? What's happening here? Derek was saying that the guy should be taken off the audit team. He has not respected ethical procedures. He was saying no.
You are too strict.
He shouldn't have. I know when they can. Now, so what do we say here? What do we say here? What is the fact of the case you have to consider here? Yes, tell me here.
You have ethical issues.
Ethical issue. What ethical issue here?
There is
Familiarity.
Familiarity threats.
And so I said he is allowing the family relationship to creep into his
Abo. To creep into his work.
It's a wrong thing to do.
That's true. Okay. So, your man said, Derek, what you were saying about the family issues, you see, you didn't raise anything about familiarity.
Familiarity.
But did you bring familiarity threats as a key issue in your answer? Are you getting it? It should be reflected.
So, okay, I said the familiarity. I didn't say the familiarity threat.
Oh, okay. Okay. So the familiarity will result into what? A threat, which will make him not to do his work well. That is why you are suggesting that his work should be what? Reviewed. Are you getting the issue? So there is a familiarity threat here that we have to look out for.
So the latter part that he said that the board should be reviewed, it's not a recommendation.
Yeah, he's making a recommendation, but as I said, your recommendation should always come after you have dealt with the fact of the case.
After it.
Yes, we spoke about it.
You are reviewing the auditor's work. Now, so the whole thing is about the auditor. It's about the auditor's work.
The auditor's work that you
You
are
are
making.
the managing partner. You are reviewing the
The
final.
team's work.
The team's work. So let's see what's happening here. So first there is a familiarity threat. What else is there? If somebody pays his personal thing and did not disclose it, what does it tell you? Which internal controls? It's also smelling there. What else does it tell us? John, you wanted to say something?
This issue also portrays
just
the
one
internal control weakness in the
Okay.
finance department.
If the requirement did not ask you for any recommendation,
Whether you can do it.
whether you can do it,
Yes,
that
you
will
can.
earn a mark for it.
Yeah, you can. You only earn a mark if the main fact you mention is correct. Then you can earn additional mark. It's called professional presentation.
It's incorrect, you know.
If it is incorrect, now say a recommendation, I just say, oh no.
Then the minors.
Yes. And that is what you were doing in the question too. Almost everybody was making recommendation. Don't do that. Don't do that. Don't go there. We will go there. Don't go there. We will go there. Are you getting it? So if the thing doesn't make any recommendation, certainly you will be tempted to make it. But before that, talk about the fact of the case. So yes, there is a familiarity threat. There is weakness in internal controls. What else? What else? Can't you smell fraudulent transaction? Or it's not fraudulent?
It's error.
Hey, is it error or fraudulent?
Correct.
Can't you smell that?
So within that constant.
The petty cashier paid for taxi fares for personal non-business journey with a total value of 175. For personal journey. And they were here, baby, cry.
Maybe Pony Brother and Boy, but Otiminka.
You back? You get the idea. So there is a familiarity threat here, there is weakness in internal controls, there is fraudulent transaction here. Now these are not the answers and then we're going to connect them together. So how do we connect these things together?
Yeah, brother, audit.
Yeah, the brother of the petty cashier is an audit team member. Somebody was talking about reimbursement. And I remember. Hey, you were talking about reimbursement. How? Okay, read the context of the reimbursement you wrote and
You
everything.
see,
Mhm.
the audit assistant, I said, the auditor should find out the overall process of requesting and retiring an interest in the firm before considering whether or not the amount is immaterial.
Okay. The amount is already immaterial, but the fact of the case, the nature of the transaction makes it material. You know, when we talk about materiality, it's in two things: nature and amount. Are you getting the idea? The amount is the actual figure, but the nature is the transaction. That is why related party transaction, even if there is no monetary thing, it is still what? A material thing.
I wrote about that. I said the auditor should review the materiality policy
Okay.
to confirm whether or not the ones in the fact is material.
But from our workings, which you didn't do, you would have seen that it's immaterial. Because just 175, if you compare the revenue million there, asset million there, profit million,
But it's material in nature.
it's material in nature that we need to consider.
Could we have said that he was intimidated by the fact that the brother was there? Is it an intimidation?
No, we couldn't say that. I don't know, but we couldn't say that.
It's not the person is his brother.
No, we couldn't say that. We couldn't say that. Now, let's connect these three things into the answer to the question. Who can try that?
So the familiarity thing,
Okay.
I would say that, said the audit.
Build your answer the way the question was set. So you can't start with familiarity because that is not how the question was set. Probably you have to start from the down to the top. I want someone to do the linkage.
Let them start.
Yes, you can try.
The scenario, the scenario.
You are ready now? Take.
The scenario and the review also points to the internal control with C, and that is the preamble.
Okay.
The audit assistant, or the auditor did not do good job because he allowed his family relationship
Okay.
to influence his audit decision,
Okay.
which is against the ethics of the profession.
That's right. Okay.
Two, he should have called the cashier
Yeah.
to persuade him to.
That is after finding out that it is his brother, he should call him to persuade
I said
him.
that's be a professional.
Okay.
Says ethically, he should have persuaded him to own up or report the issue in the audit.
Okay. Okay.
Yes.
And report the issue in the auditor's finding.
Yes.
Okay. 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 All right. All right. That's okay. That's okay. Very close. Very close. Who else can say something?
I want to say that there is a familiarity threat. If there is a threat, familiarity threat in an audit, the that interest should be removed so that threat is reduced to a very small part. In this scenario, you can see that the audit assistant is already on the job.
Okay.
So since it's on the job, we should be able to make sure that we review his work to some extent, so that all the issues that he has covered up because of this familiarity trait, those things will come out. So that will be the implication on the audit. So until we review the work that he has done, we can't go ahead and sign the report and go ahead in that area that everything is okay there.
Okay.
Then back to the internal controls.
You have time to say all this. To write all
We are
this.
saying, I thought we are
Merging all together. Yes.
So
I want to see the linkage.
Can you say it talks like George?
Yes. Yes.
He's talking.
Okay. Say yours.
Influenced by the relationship.
All right. So let's see how the linkage works. Now I'm going to just discuss it before you write. Okay. So just listen before you write. The payment of the taxi fare, okay, by the petty cashier, it's a fraudulent transaction, okay, which is about the responsibility of management and auditors about fraud. The responsibility of management is for the putting in place systems and controls to be able to what? Detect, prevent, and what? What's the next thing? Control what? Fraud and errors. The auditor's responsibility is just in relation to expressing an opinion. But the occurrence of this transaction indicates weaknesses in the internal what? Controls. Also, the audit assistant not highlighting his relationship prior to the audit is also an indication of what? Familiarity threat, which indicates his lack of professional integrity on the audit work that he has undertaken.
Professional behavior.
In the audit work that he has undertaken. I
I
don't know if you get the idea.
Yes.
Now, the management and the auditors that I brought in could be ignored. So that you say that the payment of whatever, so let's put the word down. Let's put just 3 lines. So let's put 3 lines down as our solution. The personal taxi fares represent a fraudulent transaction The personal taxi first represents a fraudulent transaction by the petty cashier the personal taxi fares represent a fraudulent transaction by the petty cashier. You good?
Yeah.
Next line, if you want to. The existence of the fraud indicates a weakness in control environment. The existence of the fraud indicates weakness in control environment. Next, the audit assistant's relationship with the petty cashier represents familiarity threats. The audit assistant's relationship with the petty cashier represents a familiarity threat. Represents a familiarity threat. Full stop, you are continuing on the same line. Failure to highlight the matter prior to the discussion may indicate a lack of professional integrity. Failure to highlight the matter prior to the discussion may indicate a lack of professional integrity. May indicate a lack of professional integrity. On the part of the audit assistant. What? I didn't mention operational anywhere. Professional integrity on the part of the audit assistant. We good? Last point. The auditor should review petty cash record. The auditor should review the petty cash records for evidence of any further irregularities. The auditor should review the petty cash records for evidence of any further irregularities. The auditor should review the petty cash records for evidence of any further irregularities and discuss the matter identified with management. And discuss the matter identified with management. The occurrence of any further irregularities, evidence of any further irregularities, and discuss the matters identified with management. And discuss the matters identified in management. With management. Cut-off testing on revenue has identified 2 goods dispatch notes dated 2nd December 2017 for items sent to Chinko with a combined sales value of $17,880, which had been included in revenue for the year ended 30th November 2017. The client's financial controller, David Mount, has explained that with Chinko, therefore, in order to minimize the revenue the receivable collection period from this particular customer, the sales invoice is raised and sent to the customer on the same day the sales order is received. Can you imagine that? The average time taken between the receipt of an order and dispatching of goods to the customer is approximately 1 to 2 weeks. The audit working papers have concluded that no further investigation is necessary. It's necessary. It's necessary. So what do we do here? So cut off testing on revenue. That's the third thing. Cut off testing on revenue. What do we say here? Obi entering our dream. Is it material?
Yes.
You sure about that?
70,000.
Is it material? How many of you calculated materiality? Is it material? What? How did you get 2.1%?
I didn't know the phase one. 17,818 over 8.7.
And you got? That's a lie. Can someone confirm that calculation for me? Don't confuse yourself.
Right.
So you are right. Are you getting it? But then what's happening here? So it's immaterial, but what's happening? Yes. What's happening? Come on. Think. Think.
So the revenue will be overstated by that figure.
Yeah, people said that, and I was laughing when I was reviewing that. Yes, we know. By doing it, because the date is wrong, isn't it? Our year ended is 30th, and the sales was dispatched when? 2nd December. So yes, they have overstated revenue, they have overstated profit, they have overstated everything. But what's really the fact of the case? You see, this is when there is an engagement party, which you have forgotten to attend. That engagement party is where we marry corporate reporting with advanced audits and assurance. According to IFRS 15, how should revenue be recognized? The examiner wants to hear this from you.
I want you to do.
But it's revenue. When should revenue be recognized? Because you should find out what did the organization do wrong, right? To find out what we have to do. So, what is the principle for recognizing revenue under IFRS 15? No. We are not interested in the plenty process. What's the fundamental principle?
When the entity satisfies.
The performance was obligation. As at November, the end of the year, have we dispatched the goods?
How can we?
So what do you see? We have not dispatched the goods. So if we have not dispatched the goods, then according to IFRS 15, revenue should not be what? Recognized. So there is an early recognition of revenue, which is in breach of an accounting standard called IFRS 15. That is a non-compliance to international financial reporting standards in the preparation of financial statements.
The accountant should be
You, the auditor, should also know.
I don't know. This is what you are supposed to do. The examiner wants to see the marriage engagement here. Say, I would say they are white boy announcing divorced. It was divorced. So you didn't go for the divorce ceremony. So that's the idea. So you're going to answer this question in line with IFRS 15, then tell us what further work has to be done. So yes, Derek, it will increase revenue. Yes, it will increase profit. Fundamentally, that's the effect of it. But what went wrong? What are they breaching? So what must we do as auditors from this thing? If something like this exists, that means that back to our points now here coming from all this while, there has to be what? Further procedure. Are you getting the idea in relation to the statement? Okay. So I hope this one you can write, right?
No.
You can write something
Oh,
down.
nah.
You can write something.
Yeah, alright.
But what is there in the marking scheme?
Yeah, tell us.
You want to add some to what? What do you have?
So let me say you go by it.
So that is it. So I'm not. You see that? If you look at this, look at it. That's the number one.
That's the scheme.
From here to here.
Too much.
But you see that that is not what I gave you
I see.
because I picked. And that is what this is marking scheme. You can't write like this. So you pick the key things that you have to mention. That is why I'm giving you the things that you have to mention when you're answering the question. So this one, how do we start it? Okay, it's about revenue. So we go by saying that. So if we want to write bullet points, according to IFRS 15, revenue from contract with customers. According to IFRS 15, revenue from contracts with customers. Revenue should only be recognized when an entity satisfies a performance obligation. According to IFRS 15, revenue from contract with customers, an entity recognizes revenue when the entity satisfies a performance obligation. When the entity satisfies a performance obligation by transferring a promised goods or services.
An entity recognizes revenue from.
When the entity satisfies a performance obligation. I don't know where you are. Where are you? Performance obligation by transferring goods or services. So according to IFRS 15, revenue from contract with customers, an entity recognizes revenue when the entity what? Satisfies a performance obligation by transferring what? A promised good or service. By transferring a promised goods or service. A promised goods or service. That's one point. So we are continuing that line. Okay, we are continuing that line. The revenue has been recognized too early by Davis scope. The revenue has been recognized too early by Dave's scope, and as a result, the revenue has been recognized too early by Davis scope, and as a result, revenue, receivables, and profits has been overstated. You got it? Has been overstated. Has been overstated. Next line. The auditor should extend cutoff testing in order to assess